Hey, what's up, everybody? So, Psychology Today put out this list recently about the 7 traits that make a great therapist. So, we're going to dive into a list of 3 of those traits today to see what really makes a great therapist. I'm Isaiah, I'm a licensed professional counselor. Let's check out what they say. If you're seeing a therapist of some sort in the United States, you should probably be able to assume that they have some form of master's degree at the very least, as well as having a license in good standing in that state. That in combination does not necessarily guarantee that you're getting a great therapist. Ideally, people who are not good fits to be therapists would have been weeded out along that process, but that's not always the case. So let's see how you can tell if you have a great therapist. All right, the first thing that we need to look for is if a therapist is open minded. And this is from the very first time that you meet with them to the very last time that you see them. This is super important because the therapeutic alliance or the therapeutic relationship, it can be called, is one of the biggest predictors of success when it comes to counseling. It's not just the knowledge of the therapist, it's not how willing the client is to be counseled, it's the relationship that the two of them have. And building that bond of trust starts with the therapist being open minded. By necessity, counselors are going to be dealing with situations that are outside of their comfort zone, from people, from emotions, from thought patterns, depending on what kind of mental illness you might be talking about. And so, throughout the process, therapists have to recognize what their own biases are and know what assumptions they bring into the counseling room. It's not that you have to go in without any assumptions, but we do have to know what our biases are so that we can be intentional about not putting those onto our clients, because that's a very easy way to make them feel judged. And so, one of the things that comes up is about goal setting. If you find your therapist putting their idea of what success should be on you and setting that as your goal, that could be a potential red flag. A simple example is if I work with students, a student comes in and says, I want to shoot for getting all C's on my report card this quarter. I might say, wow, that's kind of a low bar for yourself. Are you sure you don't want to shoot for like B's or A's maybe? And that's me not being open minded to where they are starting from as a client and putting my own expectations on them. And a therapist who isn't open minded isn't ready to hear someone else's story. Again, back to the example of a potential student, maybe success for that student is just showing up to school every day of the week, let alone whatever the grades are. And if I'm not ready to hear that as a therapist, if I'm not ready to accept that that's where they're starting from, then I'm not ready to help them. I'm not ready to come alongside them and hear what their story is, what their struggles are. I'm just trying to get them to where I think they should be, which can be harmful in the long term or even keep the relationship from getting off the ground in the first place. Second piece, which may feel like it flies in the face of the first one, is accountability. And accountability is sometimes just holding the client's feet to the fire a little bit, providing some of that outside pressure and motivation to encourage them to stick to their goals, even when they feel like they've messed it up or when they feel like giving up or that it's not worth going for anymore. Now, again, this doesn't come from a place of my expectations of what I think they should be doing or how hard I think they should be working. I have to be sure that I'm checking myself for that. And you know you're with a good counselor if you're sometimes hearing things like, hey, wait, I thought you told me this. Or like, help me understand how this is moving you towards your goals. Or even something as simple as, how is that working for you? Because a lot of times we go through life just doing the next thing, doing the next thing. And it helps to have a counselor who can look you in the eye and ask you, is this moving you towards your goals? And honestly appraising that. And that's not them saying you're doing something wrong, but just realistically evaluating for yourself. Hey, you told me you wanted to make it to school every day. By staying up late until 1 o'clock every night, is that helping you reach your goals? And that just makes you make an honest assessment of that for yourself to really evaluate your actions and your choices and how that's affecting whether you reach your goals or not. And look, even as we're talking through all of this, recognize that there are classes in grad school that teach these particular skills. We spent at least a semester learning how to listen with an open mind, to listen non judgmentally, and be able to encourage someone to share their stories, as well as to be able to confront inconsistencies and challenge assumptions and unproductive choices that clients are making. A good therapist will also be able to do that in a way that doesn't make you feel put on the spot or that they're arguing with you, but just trying to really evaluate, are my choices working towards my goals. I'd say the last thing that I really pulled from this list that I really liked is being self-aware. And I talked about this a little bit earlier when talking about being open-minded. But counselors do have to be aware of the biases that they have and the assumptions that they bring into the counseling room. I have to be able to recognize what my own temptations around counseling are. For some people, it feels really good to have other people depend on you, to feel like you're someone people come to for advice, or that people trust you, or that you're really able to establish good relationships with them. None of those by themselves are bad things, but when we come to rely on providing therapy so that we get those emotional needs met, that can be problematic and can be a red flag. That's hard to pinpoint when your counselor may be doing something like that, but the focus then shifts away from what the client needs to the client meeting the counselor's needs, which is completely backwards from how it's supposed to be. Another piece of self-awareness is to also know that the model that I've been trained in has its own biases. When we talk about the DSM or just how we view what's normal and normative, that's within a lens of Western culture. This is especially big when it comes to families. So everyone has their own background with their families of origin, who they were raised with, how they were parented, how discipline was done, how they were encouraged to do well, and what they were taught. And that bundles up together into a set of assumptions of how families should and should not work. And so I have to be able to do my own work to recognize, okay, this is what I think of as a good family, and not impose that on other people or other families that choose to do things a certain way. If it works for them, then it works for them. And I think this is the biggest part that a lot of clinicians may have trouble with, is recognizing when you are not the right counselor. And hopefully good counselors will be able to recognize this right off the bat, to say, if something I'm doing is not working for you, or if I'm not the right person for you, that's okay. Let's have a conversation about it and let me help you find somebody who will get the job done for you. Because part of that is about recognizing our own ego too. We're in a helping profession. We want to be able to help everybody who comes through our doors, but sometimes that's just not the case. Being humble enough is important to be able to swallow your own pride as a therapist, to be able to say, hey man, I've done my best. I think you may be better served by someone who has a little more training in this particular area, or maybe our personalities just don't mesh and there's nothing wrong with that. If it's something that I can change, then let me know and I'll try to work on that. And if not, let me find somebody who better matches with you. That's not failure. That is actually being a better therapist. So that's my rundown of this list that Psychology Today put out. They have a couple more traits in there that they talk about, and it's definitely worth a read, especially if you're looking for counseling for yourself or if you're a therapist trying to get better in your own practice. Please like and subscribe as our channel is growing. That really helps us continue to put out good content as we talk about mental health, the life of a counselor, and behind the scenes of the therapist's office. As always, stay well, take care of yourself, take care of the people around you. See you next time.